Hello guys, this is Joe here from the Deepwood Force of Will channel, and I've got here today with me, the one, the only,
Mike.
who's also from Deepwood, but we're not going to talk about that part. So Mike went out of his own way to go all the way to Minnesota to take part of a GP during these dangerous times. And Mike, what place did you wind up getting in this GP?
I think what was it? First place, I think. What is it?
Okay, yeah. That sounds about right.
Still pretty decent, yeah.
So today's video is just going to be an interview with Mike, asking him how his event went, what he thought about his deck, that type of stuff. You know, get into the mind of a champion.
What's that like?
Alright, Mike, so first question I got for you today is, what'd you play?
I played Alter, like almost every other person in the top 8. But specifically, I was one of the 2 Lich players that got into top 8.
Okay. Would you like to explain why you chose Lich as your ruler?
Yeah, for sure. So Lich was a big... I was back and forth on rulers for a while. I started trying Brunhild, toyed around with the idea of Hanzo, but eventually after realizing how much it hurts your opponent to have limited resources when you have the Kagi available, and the fact that Tears of the Fall not only limits your opponent's resources, but also factors in for your 2 rune 2
For Athenia.
Kagi trigger to make your cost 2. It's just like, you're already +1 off card advantage with Spoiler Node. Why not make your opponent -2 card advantage with Look of Corruption, Tears of the Fallen, and then your Kagi has like 3 targets to hit, and you're just coming out on top most of the time, which is pretty much how I was supposed to play it. And then of course Undeath is also a crazy good card.
What does Undeath do? I'm sorry, I don't usually play that card.
Yeah, so it's 1 black to target, put target zombie or skeleton with cost 3 or less from grave to the field.
Oh, I know a zombie or skeleton with cost 3 or less that's pretty good that wants to be in your graveyard.
Mm-hmm. It's basically playing a second power of immortality most of the time, which is crazy.
Surprising how good that is.
I know. I was surprised too.
So going into this event, did you feel well prepared? Like, did you get a lot of practice in?
So I wasn't able to practice too much. Obviously, I was able to, from going to locals with me. That
I don't know anything. I'm just the interviewer.
You're right. Sorry. Scott and I had just been goldfishing a couple of matches when he was trying to figure out how to play Magna first. I was learning how to play the Athenia Alter Sigurd combo, and after a while, I ended up just like writing out a flowchart for myself to know it, because it's kind of a regurgitated combo that just loops itself based on how many Schrodingers you have in deck, unless you're doing the full Shadow X loop, which goes infinite, which I still don't know. I have the Shadow X in my deck, and I just knew the play that's like, all right, your opponent has no hand, no field, and no graveyard.
Kill him.
So, which is really nice when your opponent has no active plays. But after writing out the flowchart and kind of figuring it out, it was kind of like just playing by muscle memory at that point. The combo itself is complex, but it's
I'm not going to ask
hard.
you to do the whole combo in the interview.
Yeah, I know. If you want to see it, you can just watch the finals match. I did it once and messed it up anyway and still got it.
So, you would say you're like decently prepared, but slightly underprepared, I'd say?
Yeah, I would say that going into the weekend, I felt pretty confident, but after just kind of goldfishing and reading through the combos that I pulled off again and again, most of the time it was knowing the combo that was the biggest preparation, but the second biggest preparation I found was mainly knowing how to play you have to kind of dance with your opponent when you're playing this mirror match, because they have the same things that you do. They have the Dark Elves to prevent you from interacting with them via Calico Cat. They have the Calico Cats to prevent you from interacting, so you just kind of have to know the ins and outs of your deck as well as you possibly can. And thankfully, I've played a lot of green-white mid-range in the past, so it was a little bit of a natural fit, which is nice.
Good to hear. So we'll just go into your Swiss then. So how were you feeling going into Swiss?
Terrified. Because I didn't really have a lot of mirror match practice. That's the big thing. So I'm like, all right, so I kind of have to learn on the fly.
All right.
And then round one, I played against a fairly new player from local Minnesota area playing Prisia Tempo Beasts, and I felt very bad. for
Yeah, that was probably a
sully,
wall up.
for sullying his experience at his, I'm assuming what was his first GP.
You never know.
Because he put a bunch of beasts on board and hit me down to like 23 game 1, and then I'm like, all right, cool, combo you.
Good game. Here's perfect Loki.
I perfect Loki'd his board for like -14 or something.
As you would expect.
Yeah.
So pretty easy round 1, you'd say?
Definitely an easier round 1. Obviously, I had to kind of manage my life a little bit, but with Ray on board, I felt pretty confident. Round 2 was a lot of it blurred together because I was on autopilot most of the day.
Right.
Fun story about my Swiss rounds. The night before, I decided to. Well, Derek Mubin would let me stay at his place pretty much for free.
Yeah.
Because he picked me up from the airport, brought me over to his place, and let me stay there. And I'm like, I really appreciate that. So what I did was bought about $100 worth of alcohol the night before.
Oh my.
Including I think it was a half gallon of Honey Jack.
Oh, okay. I see where this is going.
So the morning of, I woke up at 7 a.m. with the splittingest headache. Was it bugging me? The splittingest possible headache I could have had. And I spent like about half an hour over this toilet while everybody was trying to get ready. Like, guys, hold on, I do not want to puke over Derek's stuff. So I was back and forth from there until Stuart McGirt came down and was like, hey, I've got ibuprofen if you want some. I'm like, so basically I owe my state of well-being to Stuart coming in clutch. So a lot of the day was just me, first of all, not eating food because I'm like, I'm not going to keep anything down.
Oh no.
So I think I had like a Nutri-Grain bar in round 3 or something.
So what'd you do for round 2?
Round 2, I was facing off against a Dark Alice player, and I had no idea what to go into because I had never. I played against Scott's like Soul Dealer Dark Alice deck that he was kind of making for funsies, and then I went into it and I'm like, all right, cool. So I don't really have to fear too much. They're not gonna be playing Altar, and then I didn't fear the Dark Alice enough, so I got
like the
bopped
ruler Dark Alice?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I actually ended up getting bopped game 1 because he decided to play Protect the Castle with her really, really well, and swung at me for 2,000 with a White Wolf because he had Perseus Call to Action in the deck too.
Ooh, that's kind of spicy.
It was so spicy, and I was like, okay, now I'm terrified. But then games 2 and 3, I got the combo off turn 3, and he had no interaction for it. So all I have to do is not let his wolves hit me in the face for 2,000.
That's a good way to get through a match.
Yeah. So. Next up, I believe, was round 3. I think that was Paul Martinson who ended up going into 3rd place after in day 2. And he and I went real back and forth. I got game 1 pretty quickly, and then he was able to pull back and got game 2.
He was also an Altar deck?
He was Brunhild Altar.
Okay, thank you.
It was my first green match of the day too, so that was actually really, really scary for me.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, I was able to get kind of into the rhythm of things. And then by the time he had taken the game off me in round 2, we didn't have enough time to go into game 3.
Mm-hmm.
So we were just like, all right, cool. You want to just play out the 2 turns? And he's like, no, it's not happening. So we decided it was the only draw for the day.
All right.
Round 4 was another altered deck. I believe that was the Rizard Altar deck that I faced off against. A little scary because I'd never actually played against Rizard before either.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of the decks that like literally none of us have built yet. And it's one that I respected but didn't fully respect, I'd say.
Gotcha.
Because I've just assumed going into the Divinity was better. But I never had read the God's Art until I got God's Arted, and the guy gained about 2,500 life off of it.
2,500 or 25,000?
2,500.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he didn't have a full board, thankfully. So, but it was a huge tempo swing. But after a while, I was able to just kind of swing him down with 800 after clearing his board. Cleared the Rizard, pulled the Death Scythe out of his grave with Athenia, because it doesn't target, which is really nice. So you can't really road thin and board it.
Right.
And with that, I ended up just taking that game 2-0, which was really, really, really nice, because I was terrified after the first God's Art reveal.
Alright.
Uh,
How,
game
how many rounds was the tournament?
7 Swiss.
Okay. So,
So I
we're
had
on
to-
to 5.
So I had to go on to autopilot at least 7 times.
So you're at this point 3-0-1?
3-1 at that point, yeah.
Okay. So,
After that, went up against another altar deck. Yeah, I think it was altar before the Loki deck. Yeah. So went up against an altar deck. Same kind of mirror match type feel. I was still a little terrified, but like pacing myself, making sure that I was making all the correct plays. It was a Magna altar deck,
mhm.
and it pretty much came down to who went first and who got the combo off first. And he ended up taking game 2 off me, which terrified me because I'm like, oh, this has gone a little faster than I thought. So wrapped it up in game 3, took it pretty quickly. Apparently it was the guy's first GP. He was fairly new, but he had a lot of experience with card games, which was really cool.
And
So-
pretty powerful deck.
Yeah, very powerful. I do not sleep on Magna. That's the one thing I learned. Because as soon as he put the Honir on board, I couldn't play the Kagras out. And I had no move for the Honir. And he popped it on turn 1 because he had the Genesis for it, and I'm like,
Ooh.
ooh. So that was big. Round 6, I want to get up against the Perfect Loki deck that actually ended up getting, I believe, 4th in Swiss? 4th or 5th in Swiss, somewhere around there. Terrifying. Absolutely horrifying. Because every time he would just open with Harvesting Season and just had the Death Sight there to reload his hand. He had all the extra stuff. He had the Cloakies ready to go. Cleared my board, I think, over the course of that 3-game match. I believe he cleared my board with Cloaky about 9 times.
At least you have a full hand every time you do it.
Pretty much. So, terrifying. But eventually I was able to pull that one. After I got one of the combos off on the turn that he had tapped out, I held open Kaguya Mana every single turn, like going into like turn 7.
Smart.
Horrifying to do, because you never ever tap them down. You never like, okay, cool. During my untap, I'm just gonna do this, and it's like, no. You keep it there. Do not interact. And then so that was my 5-0-1 going into top spots. I was first seed at that point, I believe.
At
Ended up
5-0-1,
going
yeah,
against
makes
Ryan
sense.
Miles. Our games went pretty long, actually. Game 1, I got it. Game 2, I exhausted all of my altars. Like, all 4 of them were gone. I had no Athenia to grab. And he's sitting, I'm like trying to play it out, trying to dig into my deck with Dark Houses. And he's looking at me like, okay. All right, what do you do? Hold on, let me check, let me see. He checked my grave like 5 times. He dug through everything I had. He's like, all right, cool, I know this is in your hand, I know this is in your hand. What are you trying to do? So he sat there for like, I think his interactions with my turn probably lasted longer than my turn itself. And by the end of it, he's just like, all right, cool, everything resolved. I'm like, okay, cool. Pass to you. He's like, okay. And then comboed me, and I'm like, Ryan, did you check my grave? He's like, yeah. I'm like, there's 4 altars in there, bud. He's like, I see. And then game 3 sucked because I opened triple Look of Corruption and got Gusting Skies to open up going first. And that's how I lost that game. That was my only loss for the whole day.
But it was a pretty close match overall.
Yeah, definitely a close match. I think that might be one of the closest we've ever had, but Brian and I have gone back and forth before. He and I kind of hit similar wavelengths in terms of our play styles. We really like we would piece apart and like really like dissect each turn down to its like down to the furthest it could possibly be. So it was a lot of fun playing with him.
Right. So that ends your day at 5-1-1.
5-1-1, yep.
And it was still first, or in Swiss, or no?
I ended up getting 3rd in Swiss.
Okay. Still pretty amazing.
Yeah, Ryan was the only one without a loss, because I think he was 6-0-1 by the end of it, so he was first seed.
Ah, okay. Well, good thing that there wasn't any penalty for losing in the last round.
Yeah, exactly. I was like so worried, but everybody was like, "No, don't worry, you're shooting for top 8, fine."
So after your Swiss rounds were done, were you looking at your deck being like, oh, I should have done this, I could have done that with my deck building strategy?
A little bit. I feel like most of the stuff I did was correct. The only cards I never sided in were the Black Moonray and the Awakening of the Winged Lord.
What were you planning with Black Moon Rain Awakening?
Black Moonray was specifically because I was fearing Magna decks a little bit, and I was fearing any J-Ruler based strategy like the Dark Elf strategies, but the problem is that I would have to draw them by the time I needed them, and it was just like not really super feasible to think about it that way. If I had gotten the Black Moonray for the Hoenir, maybe I would have taken the Magna game 2-0, but by the time that was available to me, it wasn't even worth it. Awakening of the Winged Lord was yeah, exactly. Awakening was a little bit of a weirder case because a lot of people were talking it up in the house that I was at, and I'm like, I don't see it, but I feel like it might be a good sideboard tech just in case, because you have the ability to untap things with flying. So if you get to the haiku with Kage, you draw 14 cards.
That's just excessive, though.
It's excessive, but it was funny to think about. But the problem is that I wasn't the Brunhild version of the deck, which means I didn't have the defense stances to grab off them, which is a big deal.
Okay.
But being able to grab Schrodinger with them is nice. Being able to grab an altar by accident or Sigurd off the top. There were a lot of different ways, and it's a really nice way to have interactions with your opponent.
Right. Actually, that brings up a good question. I know that in the earlier versions of your deck, you did have defensive stances in. Why did you take them out?
Just not really conducive to the mana base, I would say. I think that I actually found problems where I was hitting Gusting Skies too often, and I had sometimes I had too many Kaguya, which is terrifying to think about, considering the more times I had drew double Kaguya, I was like, all right, cool, I can't lose now.
Right.
But a lot of time defense stance was just a little bit too much, and the deck space was already as tight as it could be anyway. So I think eventually I switched up the defense stances for the other two Dark Alices that I had, and Dark Alice was like one of the linchpin cards for that entire tournament. That card's actually actively insane.
Would you say it's like the MVP of your deck, or would you, like, outside of like the Sigurd altar combo, because we all know how good that is, like what would be the number one card in the deck?
It's gonna surprise everyone watching this, but Look of Corruption is the nut draw for that deck, and I don't know why. Like, actively, it's for the meta that we were in. Look of Corruption should not have been as good as it was. Like, just 1 mana discard at the start of the game is not as useful as it has been in the past. Right. But just having knowledge of my opponent's hand, putting them down 2 cards if I don't... The thing with Look is that I can look for the Sigurd first, and if I don't find the Sigurd, I can Tears comfortably.
Okay. And
that was a really big deal, especially like if I saw the Sigurd and I'm like, all right, cool, I have the Calico Cat, I can just shuffle it back in, they don't have it anymore. Then that was the case. Because a lot of the time, people wanted Sigurd in their hand because they were playing 4 Dark Alice. But I was doing Mikage Ray a trick where you just kind of play it out, grab it from the deck, and just have it guaranteed at that point.
Right. Would you have switched up your stone base then to go like 4 Black Silence, 4 Heaven's Rift to make sure that you can get that Look of Corruption off more consistently?
I might have gone forward because it's definitely like the more important mana you want to see is the Darkness mana.
Okay.
But having the Kage mana open is really nice. I think maybe just the Gusting Skies were easily the worst of the stones.
Gotcha. Okay.
Black Silence on 1 was easily the best thing I could ever hit, though.
All right. So we'll go into your top 8 then. So who'd you wind up playing in the first round of top 8, and anything you want to say about like pre-prep going into top 8?
Yeah, a little bit of it was I was reading up on Travis's deck on the drive over because Derek was about an hour away from the venue, so I had a lot of time to just kind of like think about it in the car ride over. And I noticed that he was playing the 2 Liches were in, the first round of top 8. With Travis being 6th seed, I was 3rd, so I got to choose who was going first. Thankfully, I was able to choose for myself because, I don't know, the Energizer is really good, but the Black Energizer is not as important as it sounds.
Makes sense, okay.
Going into it, though, I was looking at Travis's list, and I'm like, this guy's playing the craziest version of this deck I could have imagined. He was playing the Layla combo.
Okay.
Where you ramp up into your third stone to do the full combo on turn 2.
Okay, yeah.
Actively horrifying. Like,
Yeah.
one of the scariest things. Because I saw that he opened with like 1 Black Silence and 1 Gusting, not Gusting Skies, Heaven's Rift.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because his mana base was very interesting. It was 4 Black Silence, 2 Heaven's Rift, 1 Score.
Oh, lost you.
Incredible. Thank you, Discord. Very nice.
Hold on.
Still good?
Let me just check one thing. Yeah, we're good.
Alright, cool.
Go on.
So,
His stone base was...
Stone base was 4 Black Silence, 2 Heaven's Rift, 1 Scorched Bales, and 3 Mono Dark Stones for the Layla. And I'm like, there's no way this can be consistent. Turns out the whole combo just needs 1 green mana, and the rest need to be darkness for it to go off.
Okay.
Horrifying. So, game 1, he ends up getting it with the Speedy Layla trick. But then games 2 and 3, I'm able to turn it around. The game 3 was such a back and forth that it was actively one of the most terrifying things I've ever done. I had to like beat him down with an Athenia on board just to just keep doing damage.
It's pretty nice when your combo pieces are 8/8s. Just saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 5 of them is lethal. It's whatever. But the big thing is that I actually had to swing with a Pierre, sack it to altar, cycle it back into the deck with Athenia, and pull it back out for the last 400 damage that I needed for the lethal combo.
Okay, that's kind of sweet.
Yeah, the Pierre combos that you get off of altar are disgusting. I did the same thing in top 4 with Paul Martinson, because I'd already exhausted my entire resources for that point. So that was, going off of that, Travis and I went into a game 3, very close-knit, very tight, but I was able to pull it off, which was really, really nice. But Travis is a very, very skilled player, really terrifying to play against.
Right.
All 3 of the guys in top 8 that I played against were horrifying.
Hey, world competitors make it to top 8. That's what happens.
No, it's crazy. So, moving on to the match with Paul Martinson, we couldn't tie this time, so we had to go off. But both of us knew each other's decks at this point, kind of knew what we were doing. Game 1, I believe I pulled ahead and got it. Game 2, he ended up pulling ahead and was able to just kind of reestablish. He didn't even have to alter combo me. He was just able to gain momentum back, and as soon as the first Sigurd hit the board, I'm like, all right, cool, yeah, this is gonna have to go to game 3. But the way I had to do the lethal on him on game 3, I was able to pull the combo off for a little bit, but he had a Curse of Caduceus on board. So I could not do the full combo. So what I had to do was dance around that. The one thing that definitely sealed the deal, though, is that he tried to pull ahead with Chant of Tranquility from the side, from the Rune deck. I pulled the Don't Cheat for it off the top.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, tempo. I was trying to figure out how to Kaguya it, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have to. So I did that. Still had the Kaguya open, so he tried to go into his turn doing that. Spent 3 mana doing that. Untapped, tapped out for another thing, and I was able to Kaguya it, pull the momentum back. And after about, I believe, 3 turns of me just hitting him for 7, because neither of us were really doing any forward momentum on our plays.
Right.
I was eventually able to pull a Sigurd from grave, sack the Sigurd for the Pierre, pop the altar with the Pierre, swing with that, bring back the Sigurd, do the loops again. There were already 2 Schrodinger on board because of some things that had happened earlier in the game. Swung for 2k with both the Schrodingers, but pulling out the Shadow X.
Okay.
Pulled the Sigurd back from grave, sacked the Sigurd to the own altar, sacked the altar, grabbed the Pierre, and swung for the exact 400 I needed at the end. It's so much, dude. It's
chef's kiss.
it's such a terrifying thing to think about when you're like, all right, cool. I have 1 swiftness flying 1 drop that can pop additions. How do I abuse it?
Would you have liked more in future edition edits of this deck?
I probably would have decided 2 if I had known going into this. I'm like, I probably only need 1 really, because I can just toolbox it. But Scott had the other 3 in his sideboard. But either way, I think the 1 mattered enough. But if I had them more consistently, that'd be sick. I think Pierre's going to be really, really strong going into next format.
Definitely.
So that was my round. That was my semifinals match.
So
At
you
this
got through
point,
semifinals. How are you feeling?
horrified, exhausted. I had just finished my game. Gerardo was already done with his game versus Jalen, so he was waiting on the sidelines. And he's like, "Yo, we're going into finals." Because I just heard him like yell when he got the
Right.
victory against Jalen. Like he was like, "Fuck yeah!" It's like really, really loud, and I'm like, "Oh no!" so I'm like, "All right, so this is the Brizard that won the Brizard mirror. I'm terrified."
Mm.
So go over to that, and I'm like, "Guys, do you mind if I take like 5 minutes to collect myself because I just finished my match and I need to like de-sideboard and do all this." Judges are like, "Yep, it's cool." Gerardo's like, "Please do," and I'm like, "Gerardo, we're up Pop-Tarts. Do you want to split this bag and each of us have one of these Pop-Tarts to celebrate getting into finals?" He's like, "Yes."
Classic.
So before that, he's like, "Do you want to just like rock paper scissors for the finals? I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to come down to." I'm like, maybe, I don't know.
Rock, paper, scissors for a flight to Japan?
So thankfully both of us were already guaranteed the flight to Japan, so it was just for, spending $1,000 on the plane ticket and then another like 200 on the hotel, or not,
Right.
which is crazy. So it's the realization is still coming to me that I'm going for free.
It's gonna be nice.
It's gonna be real nice. But so I think the thing that's actually sealed our finals match. So when we were figuring out which flavor of Pop-Tart to have, I brought. Hear me out.
I'm listening.
I brought one that was brown sugar cinnamon and one that was s'mores. We're like, all right, cool. Which one do we want? I'm like, I don't know, man. Which one do you want? He's like, I don't know. Which one do you want? I'm like, do you want to rock, paper, scissors to see which one? So I'm like, all right, cool. If I win, s'mores. If you win, brown sugar cinnamon. He's like, all right, cool. Rock, paper, scissors, tie. Rock, paper, scissors, rock, tie. Rock, paper, scissors, tie. Rock, paper, scissors, paper, tie. Rock, paper, scissors, I get paper, he gets rock, I win.
Oh my god. That was the whole game. That was the whole
luck
match.
from that carried over into the finals.
Or you could have burned your luck on a Pop-Tart.
Could have. If I had, fuck it.
All right.
So he and I shared s'more Pop-Tarts.
Very nice.
And that was the legendary picture that Harold's memed into oblivion.
It's a very easy to meme picture.
It's a very easy to meme picture. I'm really glad that it exists. I was not well for because that was literally my breakfast.
Right.
It was like 12:15 Central Time, and I was eating breakfast.
All right, but Mike, what happened in the game?
Oh, in the game. Okay. That one was streamed, so some people who are watching it probably know, but the general thing is that game one, Gerard opens. Well, I get to start.
Mm-hmm.
I open Look of Corruption, see double Road, double Pharesia.
Whew.
So I'm like, I'm gonna hit the thing that's not bad.
Right.
I think it was it might have been an altar, might have been I forget what card it was, but
It was
it
a
was
Sigurd
something
GG.
so I was like, all right, cool. Let's get that out of the way. There's no Sigurd in hand. There's no Death Scythe in hand. That's two things that I don't want to Tears not in his hand. Flip the Tears, gets the Pharesia out of his hand. I'm like, all right, golden. Explore the Unknown, grab a thing, pass.
Typical.
And then he's like, all right, cool. Road to the Undead Lord. Hits a Black Wizard. Cast Black Wizard. Road to the Undead Lord.
Okay.
So now he's got 4 strangers in his grave, 1 Black Wizard online, and Azazel sitting there, and I'm shaking in my boots because I'm like,
Timer's up.
time is up. So I go into my turn to draw, sitting on Kage mana. I think he sees the Kage because I explored the Unknown.
Right.
So he's like, all right, cool. So I'm like, well, he knows that. He's not going to play Death Scythe. I'll pass. Goes to his turn. He's like, well, I know you've got that. Black Wizard Judgment?
Okay.
All the eggs are in the basket at that point.
Right.
Judgment, I don't think he forced me to do, like, sack a thing, but I think he got No, he doesn't do that. But he was able to pull back the Azazel from his grave with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how the game would have gone if he had pulled back the Pharesia. The Pharesia might have actually stopped me from going off all the way. But with him grabbing back the Azazel, he was actually sitting on a Moan of the Dead in hand, which I found out later on.
Okay.
So I'm like, yikes. So
sounds like his hand isn't very good.
Yeah. So I'm able to set up the Dark Alice and the Mikage Ray, I believe, next turn, or maybe that was game 2. Either way, I'm able to set up the combo next turn, get the first loop down, get the Athenia out, and he Moaned the Dead's my Athenia.
Ooh.
And I'm like, ah! so I know it must be done. So I'm able to sack the Athenia to the altar at that point. No, there was an altar on board at that point because I had to do it for the full combo. So I start looping the combo until I realize that he has no hand. So I'm still on autopilot. And I'm like, all right, cool. I just got to loop the combo back, go through it one more time, make sure he doesn't have hand. I'm like, and the judges look over at me and they're like, Mike, you're not advancing the board state or doing anything. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, Jorah's like, I got no hand. And I'm like, oh yeah! Turns out all I had to do was loop the first card out of his hand and it was fine, so.
Imagine hand looping your opponent without a hand.
Yeah, basically what I was doing, I'm like, alright, cool, I just gotta keep looping this to load up my grave and do the thing. And then realize that after I'd already put the things on the bottom of the deck with the first Athenia trigger. So.
Very fun.
A little embarrassing, did it on stream, but at that point my brain was already like firing 8 billion times a second with the pressure that was on me. I'm like,
I mean,
so by the end of it,
there are worse things to do.
Yeah. So by the end of it, I just put the double Schrodinger's on the board, had a bunch of stuff set up, cast out the Perfect Loki and the last blueprint from the deck, knocked his hand out, had a bunch of stuff on board. Turns out he was able to pull back the Death Scythe, top decked into it. So that was actually a little scary, because as soon as he played that, he's like, alright, cool, force you to sack one of your 8/8s. I'm like,
Bizarre has Death Scythe triggers on its backside?
On his front side, because I had Perfect Look at the board.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. I didn't even realize that one of the modes was make your opponent sack a creature.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
So I'm like, So, had to sack that, so I technically didn't have lethal on board at that point. Until I went into my next turn, went to untap everything, swing, 16 dealt, play the Sigurd, get the altar to get the Shadow X, remove 2 Darkness Crystals, reanimate both of the Schrodingers, swing 2k, play the Sigurd back, sack, Shadow X from deck, burn you for the last 4.
Nice, okay. Good
so
cleanup.
The damage was there, which is nice. And then going into game 2, I'm like,
Were you feeling like you got this going into game 2?
No, that's the problem. Like, Gerardo and I were bantering the whole time because he and I are just good sports.
Mm-hmm.
He and I are big meme lords. Love that guy with my entire heart, and I'm so excited to be in Japan with him.
Right.
But I know that he's a terrifying player. Very, extremely good.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I had my work cut out for me. So I sided out 2 of the Look of Corruptions into the 2 Dark Alice Smile, then grabbed the Pierre.
Right.
And I'm like, alright, cool. The Dark Alice Smile, I might be able to just smack the Death Scythe out of his hand turn 1. That'd be ideal. I don't get it turn 1.
Oh.
But I am able to open with just like Dark Alice and Mikage Ray in hand just to make sure that I had things going on. I think we went into, turn 2. I was holding Kage open, mana open, played the Death Scythe into it. I was able to clear it, but he was able to get it back later on. So, standard triggers there. Turn 3, I have a semblance of what I need for the combo, but not the Sigurd Engrave, so I can't do it at that point. So I decided to play it cool, try and Chant of Tranquility, get back to my hand, get the stone up to try and advance things further. He's pulling things from his hand, playing out things. He's got like 3 cards in hand at this point. Goes to his turn, plays out the card. He's got 2 cards in hand. I'm terrified. I go to the start of my turn. I'm like, all right. Mikage Rhea, put the Sigurd Engrave, Dark Alice, draw, discard. My grave's now protected. I feel good. Go to untap. Tap for stone. Dark Alice's Smile that I draw off of it. I'm like, Okay, what has he got? Shows me Topharisi and extends his hand. And I'm like, woo!
Oh, snap.
So, you can see on the when you go back, you'll see that we'd like jump up from over the table to each other and just like give like a bear hug for each other from across the table. Masks on, obviously.
Yes.
Um,
Not COVID compliant, but it's okay.
masks are there. It's nerds. We don't interact with people. Anyway.
True.
But at that point, that was the finals. I didn't even realize. I'm like, wait a minute. That's it. That's 2 games in the finals. First place. So, and then off to celebrate I went.
Did you get to celebrate that day or no?
We ended up going to Applebee's.
Exciting. Alright, so I have a couple of questions about the deck since I've been hearing about it your day. What is the optical camouflage for?
Actually, for the mirror match, surprisingly, because if your opponent drops the first Sigurd and uses the trigger, look for altar, you're like, all right, cool. In response, bounce back to your hand. And the Sigurd is now useless. They've got no counters on their altar. The best they can do if they have the Ray on board before then, sack the Ray, get a 1-drop.
Yeah, that's not good enough.
It's really not good. I didn't find it very often. In our match, Paul was actually surprised that I sided it in, because it's not a good card against Kaguya, but it's really good against Sigurd. I think I was more fearing Sigurd than Kaguya at that point.
Right. And then the Curse of Caduceus. Did you ever get to side that in?
I did.
Okay. Where was that useful?
It was useful. Surprisingly, not. It actually was pretty useful in my top 4 match against Paul, because I was able to stay up off a couple of turns against him. But eventually, he ended up doing this the Pierre loops, and was able to pull the Pierres out again, kill both of them. Because I had 2 Curse of Caduceus on board at one point, just ping him down for 200 at the end of every turn. I'm like, all right, cool, maybe I can stave this off. Didn't, but they were really good for just like, if you ever had mana left over and you weren't concerned about things and you didn't have the Kaguya mana up, Caduceus was actually your next best bet.
Okay, makes sense. I think it basically covers everything I wanted to ask about Minnesota. What are your opinions on the format?
It's tough to say. It's like, the problem that we see is that this is like the exact, I think Jeremy and I were talking about this. This is the exact opposite problem we had in Reflect Refrain format, where there's a lot of ruler diversity, but not a lot of deck diversity.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. People had their own little versions of the deck. Some people weren't even playing the Reyes, they were just playing the Dark Alices and trying to fetch the Sigurds off the Explore the Unknown. So you got to see a lot of really interesting plays there. You got to see a lot of people like really thinking outside the box.
Right.
And obviously some people were like, all right, cool. Well, maybe I'll make it more discard focused. Maybe I'll make this one more Kaguya focused. Maybe this one I'll try and get the combo off earlier. There's a lot of permutations for the combo itself, but the fact that it always comes back to the altar combo is unfortunate, to say the least. It's one of those things, the same reason that I dislike Umer. It's like as soon as the combo hits the board, if you don't have the answer, you're like, all right, cool, scoop game 2. It's like, where's the fun in that?
There's a little bit of variance in what they could actually be going for. So there's a couple of like guaranteed answers, but there's not a lot of like different answers. Like, you know, you could have like, I don't know, like something that stops damage for a turn for certain Umer combos, but like that doesn't cover every Umer combo.
Right. Exactly.
But good to know. So you don't think this is a good format to like introduce new players and stuff? It's hopefully something that we just move on from, and
unless it's somebody who's played Yu-Gi-Oh a lot.
True.
If you just regurgitate the same combo over and over again, you're fine. The one thing I will say that it's different about it for Yu-Gi-Oh is that there's actually a lot of counterplay going into the turns before the combo happens. I think it's some of the most skill-intensive turns that you'll have before you're able to loop somebody out, which I definitely agree with on Ryan's part before he said, you know, Mike Grant's one, oops, it's not skillful anymore. But I think there's a lot of really, really good counterplay. There's a lot of thinking that goes into each turn. Like, I've spent 5 minutes thinking on a turn before when I was playing against Ryan and some of the other guys in Swiss, where I'm just like, even before the combo, I'm just like, I have to think about literally everything my opponent could have at any time, because they could have anything at any time. It's
All right,
it's
they
all
tutor their
your
full
deck.
deck.
Your deck is your full toolbox, which is crazy.
Mm. All right, I think that covers everything that I wanted to bring up. Anything else that you want to add?
Really looking forward to
Japan.
obviously, really looking forward to Japan. Once COVID's over and once things are a little more normal in the world. Hopefully, by the time we go there.
Yeah.
It's in Osaka this time instead of Tokyo, so I definitely want to explore the sites there. I want to take some.
Oh, it's
I
exciting.
want to take.
New
I
places.
know. I want to take at least 2 weeks this time around. I was telling my whole company was watching my final match. Actually,
That's so cool.
I know. I was like, "Do you guys want to see it?" And they're like, "Yeah." So, I think you've met Mike Stitt before once, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So he's now employed at my job.
Oh, good to know.
And yeah, so he was in the group chat with everyone, like, yeah, this is. I'll tell you a little bit about what Mike's doing here because I've played this game before.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve, our tech guy, has played card games in the past, so he kind of knew. And then the CEOs and everyone else was like, I don't know what's going on, but it looks like Mike's clapping him. I'm like, yeah, but literally by the time the match was over, I got up to interview with Jeremy, and there were 74 messages for me from my office.
Oh my god. That must have been the best feeling.
It's such a good feeling, honestly. And the guys keep talking about it, like, you went there, you took names. If you want 2 weeks to go to Japan, please take the time for it. So it's nice to have support there. They even support me when I said I had to quarantine when I got back home. I'm like, do you guys mind if I work from home after I get back? Because Minnesota was on the quarantine stay list, and here I am. They're like, take the time you need. We'll figure it out.
I mean, it kind of just happened like 2 days before you were coming, which stinks.
Literally, like, they got taken off the list 5 days before and bent back on 2 days before.
Ugh, the worst.
Annoying, very annoying. But they said, and the funny thing is that the president of the company was like, yeah, just letting you know, if you don't win it, you're fired. So I guess I can attribute some of my win to him for pushing me to not lose my job.
It's a pretty good incentive.
It's a good incentive. It kicked me in the ass enough to where I did it.
Looking forward, are you excited for the future of the game and where it's going?
Very, very much so. I think that a lot of people have been asking me about what my opinions are in terms of, like, how power creep's affecting the game and how the game doesn't feel quite the same as it was before. And I can definitely agree with that. Force Wheel is not the same game that I started playing like 5 years ago. But it's not bad per se. It's not a bad change. It just needs to be corralled to an extent. DBV, I think, if anything ever is printed that's a higher overall, just, unfun, uninteractive power level as DBV, I think the game is going to suffer.
Sorry, I have a bad cough.
The thing is, I don't think, like, AO4, Prologue of Adoraktia, was a really, really strong stat, but it was strong in terms of general card quality instead of, interactiveness and combo potential.
Right.
I think we see, you look at cards like Shadow X, you look at cards like Schrodinger's Cry, they're really, really effective in what they do. They're good removal, they have a lot of effects built into them. See something like Defense Stance, it's just Seal of Wind and Light with a minor limiter on it.
It's a little bit more than minor.
Yeah. And lastly, the White Wolf and Black Wolf that you see are just like, oh, cool. This breaks the entire Vanilla Pie. The Vanilla Pie hasn't mattered for years.
It never mattered. No one was playing 1-will 4/4s.
For a little bit in Grim Cluster, but whatever. We don't talk about that.
They still weren't that good of cards even in Grim Cluster.
It's true they weren't. Best card was Guinevere. That's the one drop. No, but it's definitely, like, the game is definitely a different feel than it was previously, but the power creep that we see right now isn't essentially, like, blatant power creep.
Gotcha.
We see stronger cards, higher tempo, faster games, but it's always going to be until, except for, like, Infinite Loops with Athenia. Once Valhalla rotates out with DBV, I think cluster format and anything going forward so far seems, I'll say, tame.
I could agree with that. There's just a lot of issues with. I think the scope of what I Spy was going for is pretty good in its own cluster. It's just the kind of the stain of what Valhalla has is a little bit too strong right now.
There's an issue. It's mainly like the issue with like transitioning from one company to another, outsourced design, which we know they've done in the past for a while,
Right.
mixing that with the stuff that happened in, when Forcible Co was still designing things up until the end of AO3, not AO3, new NV3.
So hopeful for the future. We'll
Very
see where it
helpful,
goes.
honestly.
Obviously, it's the DBV plus AOA that makes this deck completely broken. So
yeah,
once that's gone, this deck doesn't function anymore because Alter is gone. Go figure.
and Athena's gone, and that's like the icing on the cake, honestly.
Yeah,
I think
both
Athena
of
is
them.
probably one of the most busted cards ever created.
It's up there. That's the reason why I got banned to Conquer. Haha, that's not for this video. Anyway.
And Wanderers, finally.
Oh yeah, that's true. So I'm just gonna say thank you all for watching. This has been Joe and Mike. I caught you there.
That's me.
Yeah. And thank you for watching Deepwood. And we'll catch you next time where we're gonna be doing some stuff that it's probably more of a meme than the serious podcasty type stuff.
Yeah, probably.
Anyway, thank you all for watching. Bye bye.
Later, everyone.